don't know where it is. And to me, that's the litmus test. Is it a service, and do I not really know where it's located?
Yeah.
Then it's a cloud service, and I think all three of those are active.
Interrogation begins. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, whatever the appropriate greeting is at 12:45, but thank you for joining us today. I'm Will Richmond, and I'm the editor and publisher of Video News. I'm guessing that some of you in the audience, not that I can see anybody because the lights are so blinding right now, but I'm guessing some of you receive the Video News daily email, and hopefully you take a look at it. Hopefully you don't reach for the delete key as soon as you see it pop into your inbox. But anyway, I am pleased today to lead a session talking about the cloud, a paradigm shift for online video providers. Before we get into the discussion, I'm just going to ask each one of our participants to briefly introduce themselves. So Will, why don't you go ahead first?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Will Law. I'm the principal architect for media at Akamai. And when I go to a tech conference, Akamai is a good brand. People go, ooh, you're at Akamai. And I come to NatP, and they think we're a Japanese company trying to get US distribution. We're not. We are the biggest distributor of digital content in the world. We deliver about 20 to 28% of all internet traffic comes from our servers. We're pushing about 2.5 million streams right now, and we deliver about 18 million requests per second. So as I said this, it's 72 million requests, and it just keeps going on like that. So that's our business, delivery.
My name is Jim Monroe. I'm responsible for programming at Net2 TV. Net2 TV is a smart television media company. We really focus on distribution, discovery, which is really important, and monetization, which is maybe even more important for programming on smart TVs. We tend to work with the people who have programming not encumbered by cable and satellite contracts, which is to say, independent video producers, web producers. We work with them to adapt their programming so that it's appropriate for the living room environment. A lot of web video, as you can imagine, is not necessarily well suited for people who are sitting on a couch with a glass of wine. So we work with them to make sure their programming is really, really well suited for that environment. And then we focus on discovery and monetization of that material in smart TVs.
My name is Amelia Gammon. I am the Chief Commercial Officer of Saffron Digital. Saffron Digital is an online video platform provider, which means that we power subscription-on-demand, VOD, and EST services globally. In fact, we have services live now in over 25 countries. We are an end-to-end service provider, and that means that we take care of everything that a content provider would need in order to launch a premium, secure content service. So we do everything but content licensing.
Great. So clearly we have three folks that are well immersed in the online video ecosystem. So I expect we'll have a great conversation here around a term that some of you may be familiar with, some of you may be experts with, and some of you may be kind of coming to the conversation somewhat new at. So there's this concept of the cloud or cloud-based services, and we were just talking before the session began about how to define that, and even among the three of us, we were finding that we weren't in total alignment. So just so we can try to all be on the same page as much as possible for this discussion, Will, why don't you get us started by talking about how Akamai defines the cloud and cloud-based services?
Certainly. Cloud is at risk of becoming a buzzword. So I'm going to give you my two definitions of what cloud is. In our understanding, the word cloud is not the important part. It's the word that follows it, which is service. It's basically the creation of services. You're not buying hardware. You're not buying software. You're not buying servers in a rack. You're not buying the guy who knows how to put the servers in the rack or to write the software. You are buying a complete service. And the second test is, do you know where it's coming from? If it's coming from a data center in Virginia and it's always coming from there, maybe it's not so much a cloud service. But if it could come from anywhere, you're not exactly sure where it is, but the service is always available wherever you are, that's the second litmus test. So it's a consumption of services that are not geo-restricted. And in the media context, that can be many different services. We can look at transcoding in the cloud. We can look at content protection and DRM. We can look at segmentation and packaging. We can look at authentication solutions. So those are just some of the ones we offer. Other people may have an alternate or a more extensible definition of cloud, but that's a pretty safe one.
Great, and so Jim and Amelia, feel free to jump in if you agree or disagree or feel like there's more to be refined in Will's explanation.
No, I think that's a very technically astute way of describing it. I think for me, what's interesting about the cloud is that it's not just a service or infrastructure provision, it also has a consumer meaning. And I think one of the things that's really important when we talk about the cloud is that we look at it from a business perspective, but also what impact does that have on the end user and their consumption of media content. So obviously for a user, the cloud means that you don't need to store content locally on any of your devices, that you have the ability to access any of your content anywhere at any time.
And that's, I think, Jim?
Well, I think there's a good segue there because it is for us all about the viewer, but we have a little bit of a different spin on it. We have on smart TVs, as I'm sure many people know, it's a very complex sort of app store environment. And what we do is we throw our entire service into the cloud from the moment you hit the button on the remote. So our UI is done in the cloud, which gives us a tremendously flexible UI. We can update it, we can change it, we can say Happy New Year on our UI and then take it down before, when New Year's over. We can say Happy 2 o'clock if you want to. I mean, it's an extremely flexible, easily changed cloud-based UI. We can add programming, we can take programming away. We can update discovery mechanisms. We have promotional videos that provide for discovery for the videos that we distribute. So all of that, the fact that that's all cloud-based gives us a tremendous advantage in being able to provide our consumers and our programmers with the very best possible experience and with constant discovery, which is really key. But you're right, it is all about the viewer and the viewer experience.
Right, all about the viewer, but also importantly about the content provider, because we're at a content show, we're not at a technical show, a technology show. So technology is in service to its constituencies, whether it's content providers, viewers, advertisers, and so forth. So let's start by talking about the content providers themselves. When we think about cloud services, the types of things, Will, that you mentioned, the types of things that you mentioned, Amelia, what are the benefits to the content provider in working with cloud-based infrastructure or provisioning of services? What are the key benefits there?
Well, I think it really depends if you're talking about a content provider offering a direct-to-consumer service or if they're distributing their content through third parties. But in both instances, it's really about scale and efficiencies of cost. Because if you look at a physical storage capability, then you're spending a huge amount of money up front to buy in those servers to be able to store your content. And when you look at the type of content, and I know Will can talk to this too, when you look at the type of content that the studios deliver to end service providers, the mezzanine files are huge. They're significant in size. And if you build out storage to be able to cope with that, then obviously there's a significant upfront cost. The moment those files are encoded and ready to be delivered to a service, if you put them up in the cloud, then you can scale as the content scales and as the user base scales.
Okay, great. And other thoughts on benefits to the content provider of the cloud?
A big benefit to a content owner is a cloud can remove complexity. So it's becoming very technically complex to reach the variety of devices you need to reach. I've been sitting in the back of this room all morning, and there's a repetitive theme coming through in every session, which is, aside from Mark Cuban, who challenges the notion that OTT is a way of the future. It's definitely growing, but as it grows, the number of the devices you have to reach, the formats you need to deliver to those devices. It's not a simple, it's not one magic video file you put somewhere and all devices can now play content as if it was a television broadcast. It is much more complicated than that. So what the cloud does is it protects you from that. It's an abstraction layer that you can generate your content, make it a mezzanine file, very high quality, put it up somewhere, and then automagically out the other end will come content, adaptive HTTP segmented content for an iPhone, or similar for Android, or maybe Sony or PlayStation needs something different. And there's a lot of technical complexity you really don't want to be dealing with that is taking place within that cloud. That's its value. That's
especially true, I think, for a lot of the people we work with who are the smaller independent guys. They aren't funded well enough to produce the apps that you just talked about. They're not really funded well enough to build the back end, the delivery systems, to get apps into all the devices. They just don't have the wherewithal to do that. And so I think that is absolutely key. It's sort of fundamental to our business, that exact opportunity that the cloud offers is one that we're happy to pass on to our program partners.
It sounds like from all of your thoughts that, in a sense, the cloud has become relevant as a result of some of the complexities that have sprung up in the content provisioning, whether it's, again, different types of devices, different geographies, different business rules, et cetera, that the cloud has sort of appeared, if you will, as a pretty potent solution to a lot of the challenges that content providers are experiencing. Sounds, Jim?
Yeah, and here's an example. Actually, this morning we announced a new content partnership with an independent film distributor. These are guys whose fundamental business model years ago was based on DVD sales. They would sell DVDs to mom and pop video stores and to Blockbusters all over America. Well, that business is gone. And so that primary driver of the independent film economy is gone. The cloud now offers these guys a glimmer of hope that without this massive investment in infrastructure, they can actually start to rebuild that economy a little bit because of the simplicity and the economy that the cloud is going to offer them.
Yeah, maybe just to make the conversation a little more tangible, each one of you could provide an example of something your company is doing with the cloud that helps content providers, whatever it might be. Just interested in understanding at a very tangible level, again, how it helps achieve the scale or the improvement in the cost or reducing the complexity. Amelia, why don't you start first?
Sure. So I'm actually going to take a consumer focus again because
Okay.
I think it's an interesting perspective for us. So one of the things that we've been doing for a number of years is launching digital locker solutions. In fact, the first digital locker that we launched was in 2007 for T-Mobile in the UK. Now, there's a lot of hype around the cloud for the consumer and digital lockers, and really that's been happening in the last couple of years, and it's something that we've been doing for some time. And the reason that that's compelling and interesting for content providers is that if you give the end user a rich and engaging experience, and you enable a relationship of trust between the content provider and the end user, they're more likely to return to the service and obviously become a more profitable relationship. By launching a digital locker in the cloud, you enable the user to have access to content at any point. So, I mean, we have at least 3 or 4 services live at the moment using that digital locker functionality.
And what does that mean to the consumer? They're able to, they have some credential that they're able to log in, whether they're using an iPad or their computer or their smartphone, and
Yeah.
basically they're getting same access to whatever they've stored in that locker. Is that the essential?
Yeah, so, and also you have the ability to manage your locker on any device that you're using. So you have the ability to delete files if you haven't got much storage capacity in your memory cards, re-download files, stream them, etc. And it's really kind of a precursor to Ultraviolet, which is something that we're also supporting, actually in collaboration with Akamai.
Yeah.
We've actually announced a strategic partnership between our 2 companies so that we can go to the market with a very cost-effective and efficient UV solution. And that's ultimately another cloud scenario.
It sounds a little bit like Dropbox, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is Dropbox is a cloud-based service, but I mean, it's
Sure.
Dropbox for a consumer. You can go in and get what you need, what you want to watch, regardless of what device you're accessing.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Jim?
One of the things that we really try to do, we're in the living room and we're designing for the living room. It's really a smart TV solution. So we're really focused on creating a television-like experience at every turn. One of our screen designs has 7 moving video windows. Well, if you were going to rely on the computing power of a smart TV to bring in, and the bandwidth available to the smart TV, to bring in 7 video feeds and move them around and compile them into a single screen, you'd easily exceed the capacity, probably of the bandwidth, certainly of the hardware. So we can put in the cloud, we can do that with some pretty powerful servers and then deliver a video stream to the television. So we can create much more complex user experiences, and complex in a good way, complex in a relevant television-like way. That just wouldn't be possible which is I think why consumers have become accustomed to list-based navigation in a lot of cases, because that's something that you can support, but the cloud enables you to do so much more.
And in both of these examples that you've both just mentioned, does it enable the content provider to charge more because they're able to deliver greater value as a result of the cloud powering their services? Have you seen those sorts of examples where, wow, we can now charge an extra $5 a month, an extra £5 a month, whatever it is, because of this new value that they're offering?
I actually haven't seen an example of them charging more. I think it's more seen as a value add.
Okay.
So encouraging customer loyalty by saying, actually, if you buy this, you're going to be able to access it wherever you are.
Yeah, kind of the way TV Everywhere, I think, is positioned right now.
Absolutely.
Is more as a value. It's another cloud-based service. We're back to that again. We see how the cloud sort of weaves its way through so many different projects that are in the environment today. But primarily value add, not extra fees. Same, Jim, primarily for you guys?
A little bit different for us. We're a free to the consumer service. We're an ad-supported service. But significantly, what putting things in the cloud does is it provides not only a unified experience for the user, the viewer, I should say, but it provides a unified experience for the advertiser. So now it's possible to go to one place and buy a 30-second ad and insert it across all of these devices. So it enables a revenue stream, not from the consumer, but it's beginning to create an ecosystem that is familiar enough to the advertiser that it's a place where they feel it's safe to play.
Okay, Will?
Yeah, to continue that example, we provide a lot of cloud-based services. I'll pick up one immediate one, which is advertising. So the attraction with OTT is you can personalize every ad. But think about how do you actually do that? So say you have 1 million people watching a World Cup game, and ultimately you want to be able to personalize all 1 million streams in the exact same second that over-the-air feed goes to an ad break. How do you do that? So we have the cloud-based solutions that can inject ads into adaptive streams at that scale and at that speed and with that degree of personalization. So advertising insertion is certainly moving back to the server side or retreating into the cloud, because today advertising is done with a variety of smart clients, typically Flash-based or Silverlight clients that can overlay ads over your primary content stream and do lower thirds or linear replacement. But we're moving to a world where we don't have full control of the client anymore. It's too complex, and there's not the programming environments available in smart TVs. Well, there are, but they're all fragmented across many. So it's prohibitively expensive to try to replicate client-side advertising. So you bring it back, you pull it back into the cloud, and you do your ad injection there.
Which actually it raises one of the complications that have been discussed earlier here today and in other sessions as well, and that is measurement. Because if you don't have that client measurement anymore, if you're now doing it on the server, you really don't know as much as you did about that viewer. And particularly when you're in the living room, you don't know who's sitting in front of that set. So that's one of the reasons that measurement has a little ways to catch up with this whole thing. You get the server-side data, but you still need to know who's in front of the TV.
And another cloud service we offer is media analytics, as it's called. So imagine you have several million clients watching a webcast. How do you know exactly, are they buffering, what bitrate are they playing? All that data has to be collected in real time. And if you try to build a server solution that can handle 2.5 million requests every 10 seconds, it's a lot of work. But if you go to the cloud, it becomes feasible. There's a solution, you go into it, there's a portal, you can log in, you can see aggregate data across 2.5 million consumers. You can also fly down and look at one particular person's data. And then you can unroll that data back over the last 90 days and see exactly what they've watched, how many rebuffers they've had over the last few months. So tremendous power, but underneath it is a lot of cloud-based complexity, again, that's being taken for granted by a lot of you people.
Just so we're not accused by anybody of holding hands and singing Kumbaya up here with respect to the cloud, can we talk about the other side of the cloud? Are there disadvantages? I mean, I'll give one personal example, which is that, which I'm guessing a lot of folks have followed as well, which is Christmas Eve. Netflix, service powered by Amazon's cloud, went down for several hours. So lots of people who pay their fee to Netflix and plan their evening's activities around being able to watch some particular program or movie on Netflix were all of a sudden out of luck. So that's an example of when the cloud fails. Talk a little bit about what the downsides of the cloud are.
I think a big downside for the cloud, particularly when you're talking about storage, is the fact that you're repeatedly paying for the storage of the same file within the cloud. So initially, the great news about the cloud is that you can launch and upload content into the cloud and don't have to build out those servers that I was describing earlier. But if you look at maybe a 2 to 3 year life cycle, what is the cost for holding that storage? You're paying for it repeatedly on a monthly basis. So I think that's a big...
That's kind of a rent versus buy, if I understand that.
Yeah.
You're continuing to pay rental payments to store
Sure.
as opposed to just buying once and then storing forever.
Yeah.
I would say it's not so much an issue with the cloud per se as it is with the internet. And that is
the internet's fault.
It's the internet's fault. Anytime it's easier for people to have access to a consumer, everything starts to look equal, right? And so the cloud makes it easier for more and more people to get on these devices, but it's more and more difficult for the consumer to know where the value really is. And I think that's why, certainly it's our focus and the focus of a lot of people here, to figure out how do you solve that problem with discovery? How can you use curators, use celebrities, use promotional, things that you built into your own interface? How do you help the consumer to sort through that seemingly sameness that internet provides?
Mm-hmm. Will, any downsides?
Yeah, there's certainly downsides and risks to the cloud. It's not that unicorns fly every time you use the cloud. One of the big risks is connectivity. It's entirely dependent upon you, the user of it, having internet connection, and having a good one at that, especially as we get into media. The cloud can adapt to poor connections, and so it should, but it's still dependent upon that connection being there and being ubiquitous. Your cloud service disappears the moment your internet connectivity goes away. Also, as someone using a cloud service, you are committing strategic part of your business into someone else's hands. You're putting it there. Just like Netflix is totally dependent on Amazon's S3. When Amazon goes down, Netflix goes down. Now, there are a lot of reports written about that exact outage, saying that it's actually Netflix's part of the, I wouldn't say it's their fault, but what they could have done is architect their solution better. They were entirely dependent on one storage region within Amazon. Everything goes down in the world. No matter how good someone's SLA is, that goes down. If they had been able to have a instant fail down solution to a backup cloud or a backup solution within Amazon, they probably wouldn't have had the wide system outage that they had. So but it raises the level of complexity now on, wow, I don't have to architect into one cloud, I have to architect into several of them. Another problem with clouds is they're becoming siloed, exactly that. It's easy to consume all the services nicely inside Amazon. It's harder when you want to mix them with someone else's. Today, I think we're going to see more cooperation or more communal APIs between cloud providers to enable companies purchasing cloud solution to be able to use them. It's common to use multi-CDNs for delivery because you don't want to trust one CDN, and I think we're going to see multiple clouds, although that today that's quite a complex solution, and there are companies that are rising to address that gap.
So it sounds like there are potential cost issues, there are complexity issues, there are connectivity issues. Still a relatively new way of approaching the market with cloud, right? It's fair to say. Yeah.
But the benefits outweigh the risks. So we're highlighting the risks, but at the end, we started with the upside. There's still significant upside. And you can try to build your own data center that never goes down.
Right.
And unless you've got 400 engineers like Amazon have, you're going to have a worse SLA than you get by trusting them.
Right. Fair enough. We're going to open it up for audience Q&A in just a couple of minutes, but I do want to talk about one thing, Amelia, that you brought up before, which is ultraviolet. Ultraviolet is a concept that's sort of been around for a while and is a cloud-based service. Can we just talk about how, and we've already talked about digital lockers, but talk about ultraviolet specifically as you're seeing it through your firm's work and where it goes as a result of the cloud?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, ultraviolet is a digital locker. So it's saying to the consumer, if you've purchased this piece of content to own, then you have the right to access it wherever you are and on your devices, and to share that within your household with your family members. I think the very interesting thing about ultraviolet is, one, is the education piece. So the marketing efforts that are going into ultraviolet are really helping consumers to understand what the cloud means. What does a digital locker mean? Can I trust a solution that I'll always be able to access the content? The second is usability and interoperability between different services. And I think ultraviolet has the opportunity to really open up the world for consumers. So I don't have to just go to the locker on the retail channel that I initially purchased the content. I can go to another service provider.
Okay. Great. Other thoughts on ultraviolet?
Usability, I think, is key, and it's complicated in our case because we're in the living room, and so you have a remote with 4 arrows and a select button. So I think in our case, the cloud is a little less visible to the consumer. It's more the backbone of our technology than it is a consumer. It's absolutely in play, not only in the UI, but in storing and serving video. But the consumer doesn't see it as much in the living room, just because it's impractical to expect them to do too much work at that point.
Yeah, ultraviolet in the DC consortium is an example of what were frenemies or competitors before getting together and saying we need to collaborate in order to assure ourselves our revenue base that we have with physical media. And UV today is attached to a physical media sale, and it gives you your instead of TV everywhere, it's your DVD everywhere, Blu-ray everywhere experience. But I think it needs to evolve in the future to something that's not pinned necessarily to a physical asset, but it leverages the rights and the digital locker service that has been built now. It's had some issues at the beginning. Users find it complex, but a lot of people are working hard to take those away. So at the end of the day, you as a consumer should have no idea what's happening in the background. You will simply know you've purchased an item, and it should be trivial for you to consume it on any device at any location at any time of day.
Exactly right.
Okay. Let's open it up for audience questions. I'm going to ask you to just step to the mic if you would, and anything you've ever wanted to know about the cloud, now's the time. Question, please.
Good afternoon. My name is John Laurie. I'm a motion picture producer from Michigan, and we're in the process of making a film and filming it all over the world. I just started to get into cloud-based storage and just started to buy a couple, maybe 4 or 5 terabytes of storage at a time. And one thing I haven't heard you guys talk about is security. What's the chance of, in our physical place where we're editing, we have all these drives. There is no drive. Now it's just a plastic box, connects to the internet, and I have storage in the cloud. What's the chance of me losing that footage that we produce over time, or what's going to happen?
Great question. Another risk. Who wants to take
So
it?
yeah, I'm happy to answer that. We store footage for the big studios, and they care terribly about their media assets, and they keep hardened copies back. So first of all, never put your only copy of something into the cloud, no matter, even if they give you 100% SLA, don't trust that. Buy a disk drive, they're cheap, keep it under your pillow. Put it into the cloud. When it's in the cloud, then look at what the company's doing. Are you uploading it encrypted? I mean, are you worried about, one security is getting it lost, the other is it's getting stolen or copied. So are you storing it in an encrypted way to have a secure upload tool? When it's stored, our data centers have to get audited in order to allow us to store protected content, to make sure that there's no open access. And there's a lot of audits that go on. To make sure you're loading it up to a cloud provider that has those sort of protections in place. They're going to cost you more. So there'll be variations. You can go and buy cheap storage for your kids' videos that maybe you don't mind so much if you can't find them in 10 years. But material that's core, that is your business, it's worth paying a little bit more to ensure that you've got those hierarchies of protection. And they're there and available from cloud providers today on the storage side.
Any other thoughts on that, on the security issue?
Yeah, I mean, when we're launching services, we actually use a combination of offline and cloud storage. So for the mezzanine files that we receive from the studios, we put it in a data center that we have that's fully firewall protected. We also have armed guards outside the building. And then once those files are, as Will described, encoded and encrypted, that's when we put it up into the cloud. So, you know, as he said, the cloud providers now have got fully secure solutions, but in the off chance, by having an encrypted file, then there's that extra level of security.
Good. Any other questions from the audience? It's a little hard to see. Okay, then why don't I just wrap up with the last question, which is looking ahead. So, you know, as you guys think about where the cloud is today, where cloud services are, what are some of the key trends that we'll be looking forward to over the next year or so with respect to this?
I mean, for me, I think the key trend, and Will touched on this earlier, is the level of uptime and resilience that we'll see in cloud services. I think as more AWS competitors come into the marketplace, the general expectation level of the SLA will be much, much higher, and I'm hoping that we'll see more opportunities out there.
Okay, great. Jim, Will?
I think in smart TV in particular, you're seeing consumer electronics guys build more and more powerful devices, which is kind of contrary to what's happening with all other devices, right? They're getting smaller and lighter and simpler and more cloud dependent. And I think that's a trend you'll see, certainly in our world, in the world of smart TV, start to reverse itself as consumer electronics guys start moving more and more to the cloud and building less and less into the hardware of the devices.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's the growth is upward for cloud. You're going to see a robustness of SLAs. You're going to see they're becoming more and more reliable. You're going to see a richer set of services offered in cloud solution providers. And you're going to see some degree of interoperability between them to facilitate people being able to use multiple clients or other companies straddling multiple cloud providers to present a common interface to them. But our outlook is very bullish on the cloud infrastructure.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you to our panelists for joining us today.
Thank you.